out there, they were in the lowest 3 or 4 percentile in terms of customer satisfaction. They never address that. They never really address that. It's kind of like when somebody apologizes to you and they say, gee, Kathy, I'm sorry you feel that way. Yeah. They didn't take responsibility for that. And so a lot of people just are looking at it and saying, wow, this is just a bad company changing its name in hopes that maybe people will forget that they're a non-responsive company. Yeah. And so one of the companies I'm really curious to see who's going to be in this position of doing major apologizing is Volkswagen, who again has another issue. Right. If you've read the papers in the last day or two. So
we're still waiting.
This is now they're being they're allegedly it has something to do with interest payments and fudgeting the books. So. But yeah, we're still waiting for them to basically just step forward and talk about this. So it's going to become, I think, more and more important as we're starting to see all kinds of things. One of the things is live streaming that we're involved in right now. They say that that's going to represent between 60 and 70% of all social media communications within 2 to 3 years. So a lot of brands are afraid to death of live streaming. You come out here and you can just, get the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune upon you. But we remember TV and was it Chrysler, Lee Iacocca coming on screen and basically with a heartfelt apology. This might be before some of the listeners, viewers times, but, making heartfelt apologies on TV. This is one of the things I think people can use live streaming for, or like FDR did with the fireside chats and things of that nature, to really come out and just maybe it's more like a business using these types of platforms in a way to reach into your home like Johnny Carson did. Or Jay Leno, where you're actually welcomed into a person's living room or bedroom. And so you're able to come in and talk about things good and bad with your business.
Well, the tools are one thing and they're important. Yeah. But there has to be the intent and the discipline and the transparency to do so. I mean, I just saw the CEO of Chipotle talking about the obvious, all the food poisoning that's been going on at Chipotle's. And I was actually slightly disappointed for a brand that has prided itself on fresh, farm to table ingredients, really, really nailing that message. I found his response actually very muted, and I felt like he was holding back, probably because PR and legal told him to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I felt like it was very much like Volkswagen. It was a very half-hearted kind of ownership, and it was very disappointing. And I think the tools are great, and I agree with you, Jess. There's more tools to be able to reach everybody, but there has to be the company resolve to own it. And I was very disappointed with Chipotle, actually. It didn't matter.
A lot of these businesses are anything but nimble, and I think you have to have an exceedingly nimble business these days to be able to you need to have a great person handling online reputation management if you're those types of companies. And they need to have a really good team, and they have to be able to respond with an overall corporate message, not the I'll get back to you. I can't tell you during this holiday season how many companies I have done business with that the overpromise and under-deliver has just been immense. It's just huge. And I don't think they understand in a world right now where we all have people that listen to us. We all have big mouths. Just able to go online and say a few things, the level of disruption that can have or the negative impact on a brand or a business. So, I talk to clients all the time and try to explain to them, working with like a customer service representative systems. I mean, the mentality of we have to figure out exactly how long we're going to put a person on hold so that they'll get to the point where they resolve the problem on their own and not be angry at us. I mean, that just seems like the wrong mentality as opposed to what can we do out there to really provide them with some sort of a level of solution that is both cost effective and will exceed their expectations. Yeah. Let that be a goal. So there's too much 19th century thinking still going on with businesses on every level, whether it's online or off.
There is. And I think, I think sometimes there's the tools, then there's the immediate problem that people are trying to solve. But there needs to be a stepping back and owning the bigger story. And if we get back to Volkswagen for a second, because I'm fascinated by this, I really am, because I think we just didn't expect it from Chipotle. We haven't expected it from Volkswagen. There is a data breach going on, I'm sad to say, in the world all the time. And companies are not protecting customer data. So we're going to see a whole lot of mea culpas, or are we? So what's the right way to own that story? What's the right way to say, look, we're having challenges? JetBlue got, their brand has gone up and down and up and down because they grew so fast that they couldn't keep up with customer demand. And they had all kinds of customer service issues. But the CEO got in front of it. For the most part, he stayed in front of that story and owned it. So what do we do? What are the recommendations for maybe we would say to some of these CEOs? How do you handle conflict? I would say be honest and be upfront about it. In the wake of Volkswagen, you've got to own it. You can't come in as a new CEO and say, well, I'm sorry, I had nothing to do with that. Guess what? It's your problem now. You're the CEO. So fix it. And
you know what, Kathy, can I just interject something? Because I think this is where story comes in, and this is where the storytelling culture and why it's so important to build it in before you have something like this happen.
Absolutely.
Because if you have, a culture of, finding what's happening, utilizing it in a way to either build morale or share conflict, or like if you're in the mode of finding and sharing your stories in a way that makes sense to the people who work for you as well as the people outside, this is so much easier, because Chipotle did so much work and a beautiful job of getting its core founding story together. But what is the story that supports the story when you have trouble?
Yep.
And personally, I don't actually, and again, I'm not the one who could be sued for.
Unfortunately we lost her, but I think she's right. It's a culture of storytelling. This doesn't come out of nowhere. If you don't have a culture that supports transparency and honesty of story, and people saying to the executives, hey, we've got a problem here, we've got to be honest about this, then it seems to me that a lot of this is window dressing, and you can't wait to have the external window dressing. You've got to build in the culture of storytelling.
But how often do we do this for ourselves even?
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough even as an individual to stand up in front of a group of business people who we are consulting to, and just say, hey, let me tell you about all the times I screwed up. Right? Or let me tell you about one time I screwed up, with a client. I mean, do you walk into a consulting engagement with that kind of a story ready to share?
Can work. It can work.
It's work. And because it goes against our natural inclinations. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it, is understanding what the blocks are, what's in our way to being more authentic, to being more vulnerable, and then figuring out, well, how do I need to tell this story so that I'm not only sharing what happened and being honest and authentic and truthful, but do it in a way that leaves us all a little richer for it, right?
I think there's a fundamental mistake, though, that a lot of these brands and businesses are making. Because the story, if I'm a brand and I've had a problem, an issue, or whatever that has impacted you as my clientele, a fan, or whatever, the story isn't about me. The story is about you.
Yes.
And so if I'm standing there and explaining, well, we hadn't anticipated there would be floods in China and I really don't care what your problems are. I am not buying something from you, whether it's goods or services, because I want to take on your issues and your problems.
Right.
I want to hear how you're going, because you made those decisions. You're the company. You're the one that made the decisions to do whatever it was, or you were impacted by decisions that you made. So now the only issue is, what are you going to do to take care of me and satisfy me?
Yeah.
So when I'm on the phone with somebody today, who I bought an item from on an Kickstarter, who said it would be shipped in June, who didn't send it to me until December 3rd, who sent it to me and it was DOA, who now is telling me after I've returned it to them that they're not going to be able to get it back to me and probably until January 1st. And I say, well, I kept saying to you, I needed to have this item for somebody prior to Christmas as a gift. And now you're telling me I'm not going to get it after the fact, after you had already shipped it to me. This just seems asinine. And I said, and here's the deal. I either get that well before Christmas, or otherwise I am going to take advantage of the fact that I am an influencer of sorts, and I will do whatever I can to make your life a living hell.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I can say. I felt like a jerk doing that.
I have to step in here. Sir, as the moderator. Welcome to everybody. Part of my job is to shut y'all up once in a while. Yeah, and in a nice way. Welcome to everybody that's joined. Ray, D. Scott, thank you. Art Jones, thank you. Please also, we have some really interesting stuff going on here, but if you've got a question, please go ahead and text in a question, because we're having a really robust, amazing conversation, and we want you to be part of it. So if you've got a question for people here that you'd like answered, by all means, we'd love to hear what you think, what you're dealing with, what suggestions you would make. On any of these things, and to piggyback off something that JS brought up, and I think you're exactly right, is if I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that when a company does do something that they have to really tell the story around the challenge and the conflict, they don't really have the empathy, I think, that JS is really talking about, is that you've done something that harms now your customers. You not only have to own it, but you have to answer the question, we understand the harm we've caused you. We've exposed you. We understand that now we have to fix it. Here's the steps we're taking to fix it. And I think a lot of times we see companies talk about their conflict and do the mea culpa, but they never really tell you how they're changing their business practices to make sure it doesn't happen again. And it's like an incomplete apology. And I liken it to, Donald Trump, and be like, well, I'm sorry, you're offended. I'm sorry, you're offended. And not really owning I said something offensive part of it, right?
On the other hand, my wife bought a Keurig, and it was $79, and it came and it leaked all over the place. Yeah. And she called up and they said, we are terribly sorry. Why don't you do this? Just throw it out. Yeah. Because we don't want to have to go to all the trouble of you sending it back and having to deal with that. And we have another model that's a nicer model that's $149, and we'll just send that to you.
Yeah. My question is, though, what's the difference between just good customer service and actually being able to tell a story that apologizes for something bad that happened, or somehow it cements the relationship a little bit better? I mean, I think there's what you're saying is exactly true, JS, right? We've all had experiences like that, and we all wish that we could tell a different kind of a story. But I'm sort of asking, well, is it good customer service training that they need, right?
Oh.
Or is it really a storytelling function, the storytelling skills that they need?
It's a lot of things. It's the structure of a company, especially a large one, needs to be such that it doesn't have to empower everyone in that company. I don't think the janitor needs to be at a point where he can hand out gift certificates, but you need to empower the right people. You need to be able to have a unifying message that goes all the way down. Right. I remember in the early days of FedEx, do you guys know the helicopter story, right? So they had a rule, and it said, whatever you have to do, make sure when a package is promised the next day, it gets there. There was a snowstorm in Alaska. This guy actually chartered a helicopter to bring a package. It cost something like $1,200 to deliver a package that they charged $15 or $20 for. And he was totally applauded by the company, because the bottom line here isn't profits. It's understanding that you make a long-term friend and client and advocate by keeping your word. Now, I don't think anybody really would have admonished them for the fact that they couldn't get the package there in a massive snowstorm. And but still, I mean, to go to those efforts to keep your word, and in a day and age where we don't seem to really consider our word as much of a bond, individuals don't really care if they, just. I mean, I've had sit-down dinners before where people have been invited and they just don't show up, and they go, "Oh yeah, we had something happen." Like a week later, you find out. This is a mentality that a lot of people have. So, when you go beyond that, and that's where the storytelling comes in. The storytelling is telling a story to an individual. This is something I'm going to say that is you are going to care about. Yeah. And addresses your concerns and your needs. And it's not about my profitability. It's not about any of that kind of stuff. It's about me keeping my word and me being honest to you in terms of our communications.
So then how do we, and I agree with you. I think that's a really great example. How I think Karen brought up something really interesting, because that's a day-to-day kind of customer service. We should do that. Mm-hmm. So what happens when the customer service day-to-day, to your point, JS, it's a really good one, doesn't map to the big story that we've said of who we are? We have that gap. How do we then tell that story about conflict and challenges we're having in our business? And how do we do it in an open way that is accountable and transparent? What are some best practices that you see out there for that?
You want to start, Karen?
Well, I think it's being first clear on your intention. You brought that up early on. Yeah. If you're not clear on your intention, then everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket pretty fast, I think. Yeah. And it can't ever be the intention of PR and legal to protect, right? Right. There are boundaries. I mean, for sure you have to pay attention to that, but you still have to find the ability and the ways to tell that story that doesn't make you sound like just a talking head who doesn't really care about the people impacted. Right. Right. So it's a fine line to walk, but I think most leaders in an organization, it's easier to just follow what PR and legal says than to really start questioning, well, how can we do this though? Yeah. And what are the ways to find? Well, when they take over, we all know that legal and PR have their place. Right. But I'm going to say and improviser that the story has to be bigger than that. And I think that's where Leanne, unfortunately we lost her again, was alluding to, is it has to, and she's absolutely right. And to kind of continue that thread, I think about like what JetBlue did is when JetBlue left everybody on the tarmac about, 8-9 years ago, if you remember that story where people were sitting with no water or food for like 8-9 hours out of, at JFK, and that's a horrible place to be stuck. Being on the tarmac in a plane, for 8-9 hours without food and water is horrible. But what JetBlue did that I think really set a standard to me is they didn't just own it and apologize. They took an opportunity to create, to my knowledge, the first customer bill of rights for an airline. And actually, they were part of the solution and said, you know what, you're right, you deserve better. So they created on their page a customer bill of rights. If this happens to you, this is how we're going to make it right. And so now they went one step further in not just owning the apology and not just we're sorry and but here's how we're going to fix it. And we're going to do something that no other airline had actually done. Right.
So they went beyond. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, JS. I'm just saying that's a beautiful example of how to tell that story and turn the situation.
Yeah. They went beyond what most businesses I see do in sort of similar situations. And that is they find somebody who crafts a response. And this is generally somebody who has very limited knowledge of the business, but is more of a fixer, if you will. So they send somebody in basically to wrap the body up in plastic and pull it out and, wipe the blood off the walls and make it look like nothing happened. as opposed to, really trying to figure out who shot the person that's lying there on the rug. And so that's a big problem. The major thing I see is that you have different factions, sales, marketing, research. Everybody out there has to come together and agree on what the actual problem is. And this is a tremendous issue in many businesses. Mm-hmm. What exactly is the problem? Because everybody's trying to not take responsibility for it, throw other people under the bus and all that kind of stuff. So you really need to have a system in place that rewards companies, for example, that accept responses from their employees, how things can be better, if you understand there are problems, you have to come forward and address them. And you really have to have more than just a non-retaliatory policy for whistleblowers, but you have to have something that rewards individuals for contributing to the greater good of a business. And then you can have everybody agree on exactly what the problem is. Then you have to craft a message that may not take into account your dividends earnings for that quarter or a profit picture or whatever, but really addresses it from the standpoint of, wow, I never expected to hear that from them. Mm-hmm. Well, and then you have to pick the proper person from that company to say it. So in a case like Chrysler, I mean, to have the CEO, Lee Iacocca, actually step forward, this set a precedent for many years to come. So if you're having the PR person deliver it, it has less weight than somebody who may be respected more in terms of the food chain.
I think that's an excellent point, because one of the I was just going to say, and you read my mind, Jance, we're twins. But you're the evil one. I'm just going to go on record saying that.
Well, yes, I am the evil one.
but no, you bring up a really important point, and I think one of the reasons I love the way JetBlue, going back to JetBlue, is that they didn't allow a PR person, because a PR person told the CEO, let's craft a response. And he said, absolutely not. I'm going to get in front of the camera right now. He got on camera and on social media. There was no pretty language. It was just, he went in front of the video camera with no prepared PR statement and said, we screwed up. We're sorry. And it was fresh and it was raw and it was real. And you actually got the sense of, like, he's the kind of CEO at that time that would have taken that PR, and would just have ripped it up and thrown it away. And I don't see enough of that. That to me is a great response. I see the legal wrangling over, all right, mitigation of responsibility. How are we going to do this? And by the time there actually is a response, it feels like there's been all kinds of triage internally, and it's not real.
Right. Kathy, I'm going to have to step away for a minute. Maybe there's someone else who wants to hop on.
Thank you, Karen.
Sure. Great. It was fun talking with y'all.
Bye-bye. Love.
Sometimes you don't have to.
I'll still be listening.
Sometimes you don't have to apologize or make amends with the client base. Sometimes it's actually with your employee base and your investor base. And I think a perfect example is the terrible job that Carly Fiorina did with HP versus what Meg Whitman is doing right now with HP. And for those of you who don't know, HP has just rolled out HPE, and it's really amazing to see the turnaround that they've managed to come up with in such a relatively short period of time. And if you live in the Bay Area, you're exposed to this somewhat, and usually you know people that work for HP. But they have just done an incredible job of apologizing to the people who work for HP and really turning around and trying to reestablish the trust contract between the business and its employees, which is every bit as valid or important, or maybe even more so than pissing off your client base.
There's no doubt about it. And I want to read something that Ray Colon, thank you. You wrote something really interesting. He said because of a clerical error in the comments here, his water company billed him for like 110,000 gallons, and he wasn't getting anywhere. So what he did is he created a funny video about it. And then the employer wrote him an email letting him know that they had to attend the employees a training session in response to what had happened. And he's resonating with what you said, JS, about empowering employees, because that would have avoided this. And I think that's a really excellent point, is when you empower employees to own it and fix it, you don't have to wait for a delayed all the way up the food chain response, right? Let your employees fix things.
Well, I can speak to a few of the difficulties from some of the clients that I deal with in terms of this. So you have, unfortunately, a situation right now where, if not, I mean, in the Bay Area and other places in the United States, where employee bases are coming and they're sticking around for 12, 14, 16 months. And so a lot of the employers are saying we can't afford to train and we can't afford not to train. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, again, going back to the whole trust contract that has been eroded between the company and the employee base. This is a big issue and a big problem. So we need for both the employee base and the employer to budge. We need for them to both understand the other's position a little bit more. It can't be about companies having to stock 27 different brands of energy drinks and free food and all that kind of, because what we wind up with is the employer saying we hire the best and the brightest, but we don't get the best from them. They just stick around as long as they feel they need to. And this is why they have difficulty empowering, because there's not a lot of trust. I wonder if the empowerment wouldn't create a situation where people felt like they might want to work longer at the company. But there are new processes and things that are being put into place. People are trying, the old trust circle thing coming back. And then again, a lot of what you do with businesses is really about working to establish trust. A lot of times the employees don't trust one another, and your work is really a lot about that too. So.
No question, I think, and we have an open seat in poor Leanne. We're trying to add her, and I know she's having some technical difficulties. So Leanne, we hope you join us again. We have an open seat if anybody wants to take it. I want to, because you said something really interesting. I think what happens is, if we could actually empower employees, we might actually have this built-in mechanism of watchdogs and people who are looking out. So we don't have these massive failures then all of a sudden come to the top and there has to be this big apology. And, we can avoid some of this stuff, but that we do have these conflict stories. I think what we've discussed so far, I'm going to summarize for people that have joined us. Thank you for joining us, everybody. What we seem to agree on is a couple things so far, is that when you tell that story, not only do you have to own it, but you have to express empathy for the damage and the pain that you've caused your customers. You have to acknowledge that you messing up has caused somebody pain, more than inconvenience, has caused them pain. You need to make it right. And you also have to, in your apology story or your conflict story, you have to talk about how you're fixing the problem. So your conflict story has to say, look, we've got challenges. Maybe we grew too fast. We screwed up. We know we've caused you pain, and here's the thing. What's come to light is that we value as customers, and we want to take these precautions going forward to make sure this does not happen again. We're going to do our darndest to make sure that we minimize the chances that this happens again. So here's the following steps that we're going to take. And I think it's a matter of just being very transparent about those screw-ups.
I have a funny personal story. I was living in San Francisco. I live in South San Francisco, not too far from Kathy. I was in San Francisco one day, and I was crossing on Fillmore Street. I was crossing California. It's a very large road, and I wasn't really paying too much attention to what I was doing. And a car was kind of barreling down on me, honking his horn, and he screeched on his brakes, and he yelled out, "What are you, an idiot?" And I looked up and realized at that moment that I was crossing against the light. So I turned back and I said, yes, apparently I am. And he just went, he just drove off. It was not much you could say. So I would say on a personal basis, I've at least done this once, and it worked out just fine.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you do. I was, speaking of like owning a conflict story and doing it, I was so disappointed when the Target breach happened last year, like a year, 2 years ago, I think the holidays, 2 years ago, I think. I remember going to their Facebook page, and there were probably I don't know, 1,000 comments, people saying, how will this affect me? What are you going to do about it? And there was not one person, JS, not one person answering those Facebook posts, not one person. And then 2-3 weeks went by and they, oh, well, we'll pay for your credit monitoring. And 2 or 3 weeks had gone by and nobody was monitoring the Facebook. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a total disaster. I mean, it was awful.
You know, the funny thing about this is I think it's just that fear. We all have fear of conflicts.
Yeah.
You know, like kids don't want to have to own up to, oh, my parents are going to hit me or whatever. And the interesting thing is that the closest relationships that I have with clients, in fact, many of them, hey, you're here.
She's back.
Many of the things that have turned into friendships, for example, have been situations where we've embarked on doing a project of some kind, and it did not go smoothly. For some strange reason, it's the work that I do that just, oh no.
Poor Leanne. Well, she's out.
I'm going to try. Can I just?
But it's the work that we, well, here you go. It's live video.
Hi, Jess. I know. I'm sorry to keep this in here. You do. Can I just agree with you there? I just wanted to, while I'm still here, because I feel like I got to grab the moment while I'm here. But I totally agree with you that it's often those moments, and those moments are what create kind of solidarity.
Yeah.
Create an opportunity to deliver better next time. And just kind of going back to what we're talking about, and I could hear you, so I've heard a lot of the conversation. Okay. But
we lost her again.
Hey, Walter's here. Hey, Walter. How are you?
Hi, Walter. Hi, welcome.
Do you know Walter, Kathy? He's
I don't. Hi, Walter.
He's a crazy artist in New York. I think crazy is a good word, right? I
love it. It's beautiful. It's the absolute perfect word.
He's been doing art since 1958.
Well, wonderful. Welcome. I crazy. We're all crazy. So, hey, amen.
Yeah, I'm sorry that the lady got thrown out because I came in, but what can I tell you?
No, I think she's had some difficulties, unfortunately, on her end. And so, Walter, tell us, you've been listening to us, talk about, conflict in your story. I mean, what's your thought on the topic? How are you dealing with conflict in your story?
This is how it goes. In order to avoid conflict, when I sit I do photography assignments and art. So there's the two side things here. But in order to avoid conflict, when someone sits next to me here and I'm going to work on their picture after we've taken the photograph and they figured out which one they want, and I'm going to work on the picture. I make it into a masterpiece, art, whatever. I tell them this: I'm not working for you, and you're not working for me. We're working together. And in that way, then we're bouncing off each other feedback as to what I'm doing, and I save each step along the way. Each thing that I do, I save it. So if I go too far and they want to change their mind, I'm not going to kill them because I'm going to have to do everything all over again. Just like one little stage, one little line, or whatever it is. Yeah. And it works out really well. And most people are so happy, they even pay me more than I asked for. So that's how it works.
That's actually a really great suggestion, because I think if I can extrapolate what you're saying is you almost bring them in and see them as a co-creator. And,
exactly.
And if companies actually looked at their audiences as, look, why don't we screwed up? Why don't some of you come in and join us, be our co-creators, maybe form a customer advisory board and help us be better, because you own the product with us. So why don't you help us be better? And I think that's a great way to actually, if you're going to talk about a problem or a challenge, I think it's a great way to open up the door to letting your audience make it better.
Okay.
GE is a click example of that.
Yeah.
While they haven't had major issues in the press, they've certainly had lots of issues and problems. They came out with a refrigerator where the motherboard was blowing up in 50% of occasions in a year. It got downplayed in the press, but it certainly gave them a bad reputation among those who sell appliances, something you don't want to have, and a bunch of other things. And GE now is doing all kinds of things. Number one, they're letting patent use available to MIT and other places. They're as well as competing companies, because they know that they will also grow in terms of improvements that are made upon the patents. A lot of different things that they're doing in terms of, again, working with their base of users and trying to create an advocacy panel, a lot of things of that nature. It's again, they're a complex company and anything but nimble, so it's been difficult for them. But they've been trying, at least.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Well, you don't want to compare me to GE, do you? No, anyway, not yet.
No, I like you a lot better than GE, Walter.
Yeah, there you go. You've got better reputation. So,
but as far as the art is concerned, when my art site, first of all, if someone does order art there's 330,000 images. If someone does order a piece of art, there's 30 days for them to mail it back. If they don't like it, get the money back. That's number one. Number two, instead of me being an artist like has been happening throughout the ages, I create something, this is the way it is, and you have to buy it this way or you don't buy it. Let's say with my abstracts, I create a series of different shades. So you can know that old story about it doesn't match my couch or the wall or something like that.
And then you can also order it on 19 different types of papers and
there's 7 different paper types or canvas and 6 different sizes. So you, as the customer, become part of the creation of whatever it is that you're purchasing.
Right.
That's, at least at this point, the most you can do for someone.
Well, and that's a really great point. And I really love that you have that kind of co-creation mentality, because I think if companies looked at their customers as co-creators and co-owners of that brand, which they are, they own the brand, I think there might be a different response to some of these kinds of challenges. And I think that, when a company actually can tell that story and also say, help us make it better. And on top of that, we acknowledge the pain that we've caused you. We want to make it better. Here's what we learned. I think in that context for storytelling, that's very powerful, because it says to the users, hey, we get that you need to be involved. We get that we've caused you pain, and we actually have learned from it. We've learned, here's what we've learned, and here's what we're going to do to try to make things better for you. I think that's what a great conflict story has to have. Here's the conflict. Here's the things that went wrong. We own that, and here's how it's going to be better in the future.
Okay. So what I actually, if you look at it from a different perspective, what I'm trying to do in most cases, if I can, is to avoid the conflict before it gets there.
I totally agree with you.
And that's how you can really create products that people want.
Totally agreed. And in the end, if you treat them as co-creators, you should avoid it. But let's face it, stuff happens. And when it does happen, you hope you minimized it. But if you didn't and stuff did happen anyway, you still have to have a response that's sincere and real. And it's on a scale that's just bigger than you and I, and you have to deal with that. But yeah, if you're treating them as co-creators on the front end, hopefully you're minimizing some of that, and that's an ideal world, that's for sure.
The other thing is the utilization of advocates and superfans. So if you have a problem,
that's a big word.
you can have your advocates and your superfans say, look, I've been using their products, their services. I know this company at whatever, and I love everything they're doing. And I know this doesn't make you feel any better, but I think this is an isolated instance, and you can feel better when. So you may not feel as though you have a relationship or can relate to the company, but you can certainly relate to other people who present themselves as the same as you. You're a housewife, I'm a housewife. You're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. Whatever it might be. And I use these products, and my experience is a little bit different. So you see that happen. I mean, I'm writing a book right now called 5-Star Fiasco, which is all about why online reviews and referrals and recommendations generally don't work for the most part. And I think what we're going to be going back to is trusted sources very heavily.
Yeah.
That
I agree.
As far as really getting the nitty and the gritty, it's just too easy to buck the system or fake the system.
Yeah.
So if one of the issues is if I read a review about a Mexican restaurant and everybody says the food's really spicy, how do I know what they consider to be spicy food? I mean, if
that's a brilliant idea, a concept.
so there's all these issues. If Kathy goes to a Mexican restaurant and I go, I'm looking for cheap, authentic food. She wants 2-for-1 happy hour drinks, and neither one of us. I mean, at that point, it's impossible for us both to give them 5 stars, because we're not going to. One of us is going to get maybe the experience we're expecting, the other one not. And this is an issue that businesses also need to understand too. Yeah. Sometimes the utilization of products or services is going to be different, and you're going to have different customer bases, and that's a big another issue of business storytelling. Right now, everything that we're discussing tends to work pretty much against all demographics, but in particular, in dealing with millennial mindset, and we say millennial mindset because it doesn't belong to just 16 to 35-year-olds. It can be anybody who tends to think the way millennials do.
Absolutely.
This is a solution.
I gotta jump in here. We have a couple of minutes left in the blab. If there are any last minute questions or comments, thank you so much, everybody. If you've got them, we'd love to hear them. And thank you to Ray Cologne. Thank you, Walter.
Another question.
Let's.
This is my first blab with Kathy where we didn't do improv.
We did it, no, but as a storyteller, we kind of are, because this is a very improvisational medium. Trust me.
Yeah, it is.
So let's take one more question, and then what I want to do is segue to final thoughts. Like, what's your final thought on the topic? So one more question, Walter. Did you have a question?
Yeah. When you say about millennial mind, I don't know what that means at all. I deal with people of all ages all the time. Yeah. So I haven't delineated between the 92-year-old or the 50-year-old, the 30-year-old, or the 22-year-old. Yeah. They're all coming to me all the time. So I deal with each individual as an individual, as with my photography business.
Yeah.
And like someone steps in and I talk to them like a person and that they are. And I ask them about why they're here, whatever it is. And I find out specifically for them, as we're working, all different information that goes into the making of the product.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Well, ideally, you'd like to have one main message and one main way of delivering it. But in terms of advertising and marketing and really speaking to the different groups of individuals that make up the whether you want to call it the core client base, we generally find with most businesses and brands and services that they have to have different messages, or at least slightly different messages. So, you see that advertising can be skewed in a lot of different ways towards age groups, ethnicities, backgrounds. We communicate differently based on our ages and based on our ethnicities and areas that we come from. So the idea here is, how do we take all these different messages and yet have them all offer the same value propositions, the same worth, where we're not really saying we value you more than anybody else. We just value you. And we're speaking in a language that is respected and accepted. And this is a huge challenge today.
Yeah, in a way that you get. And I think what Walter may be facing is that for some products, the millennial mindset's no different from, older cohorts. But for some products and some services,
it depends on where you are actually in the art world. In the art world, depending on how you're selling and where you're selling. There are vastly huge differences between how a 21-year-old may be purchasing art, or why they're purchasing art, and a 50-year-old.
Well, I was referring to my photography assignments.
Right. So we got to wrap up. Actually,
okay.
It's what I
wrap it up. It's Christmas time. Go ahead.
It's a great question, and that may be a whole other blab. But I want to wrap up and just refocus really quickly. Jess, do you have a final thought on business storytelling in terms of when it comes to sort of adding conflict or being really honest about the conflict?
The final thought that I have is threefold. One, agree on what you feel the problem is. Two, find the correct person to deliver the apology. And three, it needs to be a heartfelt apology. And that's the three main things. And the guiding principle behind all of that is, if you have to throw $1,000 out to solve a $30 problem, that is something you may have to do. This is what doing business is like these days. It is not for the faint of heart. Yeah,
I think well said. I think I would summarize it as, and I think, thank you, Ian, Dynamic Speaking. I love your handle, by the way. It is true. If you can, the more you can treat your customers as co-creators, as Walter pointed out, you hope to minimize these things. So that's an important lesson, I think, in this. Secondly, the right spokesperson matters, as JS says. Pick somebody with credibility. And I'm sorry, PR folks, it ain't you. It ain't you. You got to find somebody that really has credibility. Thirdly, an apology is not enough. When you tell a conflict story, you have to have empathy for the pain that you've caused people. Volkswagen caused people pain. Chipotle caused people some serious medical pain. So there has to be more than an apology. What are you going to do to make sure you give some confidence to your customers that you're taking steps to minimize this from happening again? And be very open about that plan. What are you going to do? Be honest about it and collect customer feedback and input on that plan. Let them be part of fixing that for you. And I think that's what I would add. So,
Kathy, I'd like to read what Ian wrote, just because it probably won't show up in the replay.
Oh, no, I saw that. So you want to go ahead and read it?
I just reaffirm that the notion of sharing the stories of conflict overcome show that an organization learns and how it values listening to customers as a priority. To hide those challenges misses a huge opportunity for positive marketing. I couldn't have put that any better. But that's exactly it. You have to show that you've learned, and that thank you, Ian. That was
absolutely
wrap up.
No, absolutely, and we're in agreement on that. If you don't say what you're doing differently, you didn't learn. And if anything, that's a positive thing for your marketing. So I'm with you, Ian. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us. Karen Dietz, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, Leanne. Who, if you get a chance to follow Leanne at the Story Powered Institute, Leanne is lovely. She knows a lot about business storytelling. She's a good friend. I'm so sorry she had some technical difficulties, but to everybody who gave your time today and joined us, thank you. JS, Walter.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Always a pleasure to be on here with you.
Oh, it's great fun for me.
It was a nice meeting you.
You too. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.